welcome to Yesterday's Canada, podcast number 5. A podcast series to explain Canadian history from 1713 to 1800 AD. This is an 8-podcast series being posted on YouTube under the name Prehistoric Pixel. These podcasts will showcase major events, disputes, battles, and more. Stay tuned, episodes drop every Sunday. Our topic today is Canadian history from 1757 to 1767.
During the summer of 1758, the British persisted in their attack, engaging in several significant battles. General James Abercrombie's forces were decisively defeated on July 8 in the Battle of Carillon by the well-established French and Canadian forces at Fort Tiggeranga. The American and British colonial forces were routed, despite having a vast numerical advantage, and suffered significant fatalities in the process.
Fatalities, whatever. Six Slashers has so many fatalities. Look at that.
First of all, stop talking about Six Slasher. Second of all, you know how many fatalities they had?
5, 20, 50, 100.
Okay, again, you can't even get 500 fatalities in Six Slasher. And secondly, they had over 5,000 to 6,000 casualties.
Oh, damn, that's enough.
Yeah, don't disrespect my boy like that. But a few weeks later, on July 27th, the capitulation of Louisbourg marked a turning point. Following a 48-day siege, the strategically significant bastion was successfully taken by the British, led by James Wolfe and General Geoffrey Amherst, severely undermining the French naval force in the area.
In the ensuing months, the British gained more and more momentum. At the Battle of Fort Frontenac in August, Colonel John Bradstreet led a colonial militia army to victory, successfully seizing and destroying the French stronghold close to modern-day Kingston.
Good. They got A+.
Notwithstanding these achievements, there were also failures.
Never mind.
Lol. Major James Grant's Highlanders were defeated on September 14th at the Battle of Fort Duquesne, where Charles Philip Aubrey's smaller French and Indian army drove them back.
A smaller army? That's F-. What is this?
You're not Indiana Jones. Still, the balance of power throughout the war remained tilted towards the British. Fort Duquesne was burned to the ground by French garrison on November 25th and was given to General John Forbes, who christened it Pittsburgh in honor of William Pitt the Elder, the British Prime Minister at the time.
Sounds like Joe Biden.
Okay. Meanwhile, important political developments were taking place in Nova Scotia. The inaugural meeting of the Nova Scotia Provincial Parliament on October 2nd, 1758, signaled the start of a new phase in colonial government. After the Acadian population was driven out, efforts were made, under the direction of Governor Charles Lawrence, to promote settlement and farming of the province's lands.
The British were in a strong position as the year came to an end, the triumphs changing the geopolitical landscape of North America. As Great Britain established its dominance over important New World countries, the events of 1758 laid the groundwork for additional hostilities and diplomatic wrangling in the years that followed. The war began as hostilities between France and Great Britain over their respective claims to territory in North America grew more intense. A series of confrontations between British settlers and their native allies and French attempts to establish dominance over the Ohio River Valley through the construction of forts occurred in the 1750s. These conflicts reached a peak in May 1754 at the Battle of Jumonville, where a youthful George Washington ignited the fires of war by leading a British expedition against a tiny French force.
French F- tiny. The struggle grew more international in the scope as it developed, involving combat and political moves on several continents. The British achieved great success in North America, seizing important French provinces like Quebec and Louisbourg. Louisbourg. A major turning point in the conflict was the surrender of these strategically important strongholds, which established British dominance over most of North America. This period of dispute and negotiation was interspersed with military campaigns and diplomatic maneuvers. The 7 Years' War culminated in the British forces' conquest of Quebec after the critical Battle of the Plains of Abraham in 1759. British rule over Canada was cemented with the fall of Montreal and the capitulation of French forts throughout the region as a result of later campaigns spearheaded by General Geoffrey Amherst. Smaller skirmishes and naval battles, like those that took place in and around Quebec in April and May of 1760, underscored the strategic significance of important forts and cities in addition to these military triumphs.
Meanwhile, despite early defeats, Persia
I hate Persia!
in Europe was able to hold on to its position thanks to a combination of strategic geniuses and good fortune. Although its initial objective was taking back Silesia from Austria was not accomplished, Prussia came out of the war as a respected European force.
It's Prussia. Respect,
Prussia.
not Prussia.
Oh,
Prussia,
don't
Prussia.
hate Prussia, right? Right?
Prusa.
Concurrently, the onset of the 7 Years' War in India rekindled the long-running rivalry for dominance between French and British commercial enterprises operating within the subcontinent. The French attempted to thwart British expansion by allying with the Mughal Empire, but for the most part, their efforts were in vain. Leading men such as Sir I. Coote and Robert Cleve, the British forces won major engagements, taking back territory and soundly beating the French in Plassey and Wandy Wash. Washing machine? French influence in India had been virtually destroyed by British in 1761, where they took control of important towns like Pondicherry and established their supremacy in the area.
Significant ramifications of the war also affected other European nations, including Sweden and Spain, whose territorial ambitions and alliances brought them into the war. The frontiers of empires were altered by the treaties of Paris and Huntersburg, which ended the wars in North America and Europe respectively, and paved the way for more hostilities and rivalries. Following the conflict, Great Britain overtook France and Spain as the leading colonial power, seizing enormous swaths of territories in the Caribbean and North America. But the war's effects went well beyond claiming new territory. They also had an impact on the geopolitical landscape of Europe and beyond.
The 7 Years' War has been recognized by historians as the first really global conflict, influencing the path of history for generations to come and heralding the rise of modern warfare. The aftermath of the war spread through continents, creating the conditions for Prussia's ascent, the emergence of British imperialism, and the dissolution of Europe's power system.
We travel back in time to begin charting the historical course of colonial North America, starting with the aftermath of the British conquest in the middle of the 18th century. The British established their dominance over the recently acquired Canadian lands between 1763 and 1820, principally through the expansion of the fur trade and significant investments in the growth of Montreal.
Wow.
The Pontiac Rebellion, which took place between 1763 and 1766 and threatened British authority in the Great Lakes region, but eventually failed to overthrow it, shows that this period was not without resistance. Nevertheless, during this period, treaty discussions were important. The Treaty of Paris, which was signed in 1763, officially transferred sovereignty of Canada and its islands from the French to the British, paving the way for later events.
And also, remember, the reason the Pontiac Rebellion was so successful was because most of the British troops were in India, as we said before.
British colonial policy and indigenous resistance became prominent issues during these geopolitical changes. The 1761 Get Tough with Indians policy of General Jeffrey Amherst, which included using blankets infected with smallpox, led to insurrections by native leaders such as Odawa Chief Pontiac. The colonialist unhappiness was excavated in 1764 to 1765 with the implementation of tax recovery measures like the Sugar Act and Stamp Act, which affected both the American colonies and Canada. Following the French and Indian War, Pontiac, the leader of the Odawa tribe, spearheaded the outbreak of Pontiac's War, sometimes referred to as Pontiac's Conspiracy or Pontiac's Rebellion, in the Great Lakes region in 1763. Native American tribes launched attacks on forts and communities in an effort to overthrow British rule. Tensions were increased by British policies, particularly those of General Jeffrey Amherst. Despite opposition from the Native Americans, British expeditions and peace negotiations brought an end to the war in 1764. The racial gap between indigenous peoples and colonists grew wider as a result of the war's ferocity and atrocities committed by both sides. The British responded by issuing the Royal Proclamation of 1763, which set boundaries in an effort to stop future hostilities.
The colonial landscape was altered by social and legal reforms against this background of conquest and conquering. The Royal Proclamation of 1763 imposed new borders and regulations such as prohibitions on westward settlement, safeguards for native areas. The division of Quebec into judicial districts created administrative issues because the newly acquired territory had complicated government structures. In 1767, Acadians were granted property as a part of an attempt to integrate displaced groups, which highlighted the continuous cultural and demographic changes occurring in the area.
The dynamics of colonial life were illuminated by cultural ideas and economic strategies within the context of these larger historical currents. Native American customs include the use of tomahawks, wampums, and calumet were vital to diplomatic discussions and cross-cultural interactions. In the meantime, attempts at economic reform were made to stabilize the colonial and economic and bring in income, such as the 1767 imposition of taxes on British spirit imports. Built as a defense fortification against possible invaders, Fort Dauphin represented the continuous battles for dominance and control throughout colonial North America.
That is all for today's daily podcast. Make sure to subscribe to Prehistoric Pixel and stay alert for the next episode in the series. This is Yesterday's Canada,
Tuning out.